Welcome to the stream, everybody. I'm Frank Boucher, your host. And today on All Around Azure, I'm with Thomas Maurer. Hello, how are you?
Hello, Frank. I'm doing great, to be honest. Feeling very good today. For me, it's now like almost done with work today. This is one of my last duties before I then go and maybe go to sleep. Well, we'll see about that, but that would be the plan. How are you today?
I'm good. It doesn't feel like a Monday today, although I love Mondays. I don't know what. I like my job, so I think that helped, right? But
Nice. You're not like Garfield then in that case.
no, definitely not. Always super pumped on Mondays. I have a bunch of stuff to do. I'm always like, I want to do more. And Monday usually go really fast. So, yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? I know, it's a classic on the show, so you are a cloud advocate just like me. But what's your passion? What are you working on these days?
Yeah, so I'm usually more focused on IT operations kind of tasks. As you said, I'm also part of the Azure or the Azure Cloud Advocates, and I'm very passionate about everything which has to do with hybrid. So when it comes to server management or just using like your on-prem systems together with Azure, make them better by using Azure services or moving stuff and taking advantage of both, that is where my passion is right now. And I'm also doing a lot of PowerShell stuff as well, Windows Server. I come basically from the Hyper-V virtualization world, and that is where I did basically start with all the Microsoft stuff. Is in the old school Active Directory, Windows Server, Hyper-V, System Center stuff. That is where I come from, and then obviously transitioned very, very strongly to Azure and cloud-related things, and then hybrid with Azure Stack, with Azure Stack Hub, and now the latest thing I'm working a lot with is Azure Arc.
Ooh. I thought about you. That's true. I forgot to tell you before the show started. I was listening a podcast this weekend, and what was it? I'm looking in my notes. I was with Dwayne Monroe.
Okay.
Dwayne Monroe.
Yep.
And he was talking about a bunch of stuff, but also Azure Hybrid and everything. And it was on the Screaming in the Cloud podcast. I don't know if you know that podcast.
Yeah. I think that's the one. Yeah, that one is more focused on others, but yeah, absolutely. I know the podcast, and I'm definitely interested to. That's a good point. I'm definitely gonna listen to that one, and especially because it's a hybrid episode, I'm definitely gonna listen to that.
It's all things Azure or something like that. But he spent a good time talking about hybrid, and was like, oh, I wonder if Thomas is know that show. Cool.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? You want to share your screen and let us know a little bit what is Azure Arc, so to ramp up everybody, and me by the same occasion. I'm not. I know what it is, but I didn't use it yet. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fantastic idea. Let's have a look on my screen. I open up. I don't have any slides or anything, but let's just look at the web page of the Azure Arc product page, and then we can take it from there. And I want to just give people a quick introduction. To be honest, most of our stream today is going to be demos and how to set things up and all that. But before we start really making the point what it actually is, that people understand what we actually up to, right?
Cool.
So before I get started, is that a little bit of history or why we are actually using Azure Arc and hybrid management, why this is a big deal, right? One of the things we see a lot from our customers today is that their environments get increasingly complex, right? The cloud offers a ton of new options for them, which is great, which helps them obviously. But at the same time, if you are a traditional company existing for a couple of years now, you kind of have a lot of different things going on. And so what we see is like typically there are a lot of challenges, but three of the most or the largest challenges are really, I want to quickly have a look at these. So the first one is the application landscape, right? If you look at the typical IT environment today, they have hundreds, if sometimes not thousands of applications they need to manage. And some of them are very modern applications based on modern languages, running on PaaS services, running containerized or even serverless. And I know you do a lot of work with functions and things like that. So those can be, again, very modern applications. But then there are also very traditional applications, and still a lot of them running in virtual machines, running even on physical machines, right? And IT operations, but also developers, they all need to take care of these applications. And then the second one really where we see is that IT departments or companies also have a very diverse infrastructure. So they run probably their own data centers, they run their branch offices, factories, they run services at the edge, probably using IoT. They have different hardware providers and all of that. And again, IT operations and IT in general needs to manage all of that. And then the last part is multi-cloud, right? I think that is also a very important part, is the whole multi-cloud aspect, because some customers, they already invested in other cloud providers, but then they decide to go with Azure, which is, by the way, a fantastic decision if they to go with Azure. But they're not suddenly going to move everything like over again, right? Some departments, they keep their workloads there, or for some companies, they even have the strategy to use multi-cloud for whatever reason. Could be that they like a service better, or that they want to have multiple cloud vendors just in case. And so somehow you need to manage that complexity. And that is a good example where Azure Arc comes in. Because when we started with Azure, and I remember I think we had a talk about that a couple of months ago when we still were able to travel.
Back in those days, right?
Back in those days, it feels like forever. It's like when we started with Azure, we also suddenly realized that there's a lot of things to manage, right? Everything is an object. So you have virtual network adapters, you have servers, you have virtual networks, you have serverless apps, you have PaaS services, and so on. You have databases and all of that. You need to somehow manage and organize and do the life cycle management of that. And so we have some great management tools and some great management using, for example, Azure Resource Manager to manage all of that. And now people tell us, okay, hey, now we have a tool in Azure, which is great, which works great for the Azure services. Why would we not just use the same technology? Why can we not just use this for resources which live outside of Azure, right? And bridge that gap. And do you see what I did there? So this is what basically Azure Arc can help with. And again, if you look at it at the website, you can see here, if you need to have one sentence, bring Azure services and Azure management to any infrastructure. And this is really like the simplest way, the shortest way you can say what Azure Arc is. And then we have obviously here, you can see here, where an important part here is when we talk about hybrid today, hybrid for us doesn't mean just necessarily Azure and on-premises anymore. It also means at the edge or in multi-cloud environments. And I think this graphic here shows it pretty well. Again, this is a video. If you want to watch it later, you can do that as well. And so Azure Arc can do a couple of things today, and we will have a look at especially one. But as you can see, there is not just one thing we can do. There's like 3 different scenarios today which we can address, and each of those scenarios has a lot of different features. But it's important to understand these 3, so when I jump in later, we can actually see what we're doing here. The first thing is organizing and govern across your environment, right? I know, Frank, like we have the same thing, right? When we are in our subscription, we kind of need to keep control, and we need to see, hey, who is spending what? We need to make sure that everything is configured securely. So we need to take care of this. And that doesn't matter if that's Windows servers or Linux servers or Kubernetes clusters. We want to manage these. And Azure Arc can help us with the resource to do that with resources outside of Azure. And then we have app management for Kubernetes clusters, where we can actually go out and not just configuring the Kubernetes cluster using policy. We can also then configure application deployments. Basically, we're using GitOps to make sure that we can deploy applications, containerized applications, to our Kubernetes clusters, again, running outside of Azure. When I speak outside of Azure, that could mean on-prem, or that could mean at another cloud provider, or anywhere actually. And then the last one, I'm not going to talk too much. I can't really show much about this because this one is still in private preview, is the Azure Data Services part. And Azure Data Services is a little bit different. It not just allows you to add on local resources and manage these, it also allows you to actually deploy Azure SQL and Azure Postgres in your data center or wherever you want them to run. You could even run them on top of another cloud provider and take advantage of this.
Oh, interesting.
Yep, that's especially like, it's just crazy, right? So you could go out and run Azure SQL in one of our other cloud providers. So this is like, this is really great. But actually, a lot of people ask for that because they say, hey, look, we really love Azure, and we love Azure SQL. We love that it's a managed service, that we don't need to take care of upgrading our SQL servers and all of that, that we can scale it out whenever we need to. But some of our data actually needs to stay in our data center. That could be like regulatory reasons or latency reasons or connectivity reasons, right? So not everyone has, not every application can deal with like a certain amount of latency to the cloud, for example, or you don't want to have these dependencies that when your internet connectivity is gone, that your whole factory stops, right? So that is where Azure Arc Data Services can help. Perfect. So, as you know, I prepared a little bit of a demo here, and sound is fine. That sounds great, by the way. So I really want to jump into the presentation here and basically do that all in the portal. But before we set the whole thing up, I want to show you how would that actually look like. And I'm sure, Frank, I'm pretty sure you're also familiar with the Azure portal. So I'm here in the...
I never opened that portal. What is it? Look amazing.
Right? That's what I'm telling people. The portal is probably the most underestimated thing ever, right?
Oh, no, like yeah, it is. Like it is awesome. Like I always say that people don't feel guilty to go there and search and use the search bar and stuff, because things are always moving inside that portal. It's very, very well done, and it's perfect. Of course, when you are in production and you deploy and like you will build script or CI/CD or automatic process. But the first time you want to do something or just want to know if something is working, the portal is the best tool.
Yep. It's great to discover things, right? I'm not saying obviously you need to deploy everything like from the portal, right? But if you especially want to get a view and you quickly want to do something or you want to try something out, it actually has some pretty neat stuff in here. However, back to Azure Arc. So where I'm here, I'm at the All Resources page in the Azure portal, and you can see here. I was telling that before. You can see here all the different objects and resources we have in Azure, right? These can be just a simple public IP address, a routing table, a virtual machine, network security groups, disks, databases. So everything you deploy, you can basically find here. And then you get you can organize these resources. You can use like resource groups to group them, and then also use that, for example, for role-based access and stuff like that. You can see that they're also always living in a Azure region, right? So my stuff is mostly deployed in West Europe. And then you can also see that you can also organize it by subscriptions. And okay, for my case, I have one subscription where I do my demos and tests and stuff and so on. But if you're a company, you probably give different departments, different environments, or even different applications, separate subscriptions, right? That's like a way to organize your environment. And then you have cool things like tags, where you can go out and tag your resources here and say, for example, okay, I have a cost center tag, and I will show you a little bit about that in a bit. And then I also can, for example, what I often use is a location tag to actually mark the location of that resource. And again, in Azure, it's pretty simple because you already have deployed it to a specific data center. But when it comes to general management, especially in the hybrid world, it can make sense to have that location tag. Now, people often then ask, like, this is great, but again, why can I only, or wouldn't it be great if I can also see resources which are not in Azure? And that is exactly, as I mentioned, where Azure Arc comes in. So what I'm going to do here, quick filter here. So I don't want to see all of the resource anymore. Let's just say I want to see, to make it a little bit easier to explain, my Azure virtual machines. So those are all my machines, my virtual machines and VMs running in Azure. And then I have a new point here because I already joined a couple of servers here called Azure Arc machines. So I'm going to select this. And now it filters all the resources. And now what you can see here, I can also, let me quickly group this by type to make it even more clear. So you can see here on the bottom, I have all my Azure virtual machines, like as you would deploy before.
That I'm hiding with my beautiful face. Let me hide my camera 2 seconds. Voila.
Wait. Nice. That's the beauty about live streams, right? So you can see here and it was perfect. It was exactly like where your face were, like, so you can see here on the bottom the Azure virtual machines here. You can see here again, as I said, joined to a resource group, a subscription, and using tags. But on the top here, you can see Azure Arc machines, and those are servers and machines, Linux and Windows, which are not deployed in Azure. They are deployed on different places, like my own data center, which is, by the way, just a server here underneath my desk. But they can also be running at other cloud providers as well, or wherever they are running. And now you can see they're also joined to a resource group. They are even joined to an Azure region. And then they can even be joined, or they have to be joined to an Azure subscription.
Just 1 second, Thomas. Your camera froze.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
So let me quickly. That easy peasy. That's just.
At least you are smiling, but you're frozen.
I had some very bad experience with that, so I should be back.
You're back. No, I was
Perfect.
just looking at it, and Mr. Swoofy. That is also. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. So you can continue.
No, perfect for reminding me. It happens like I need to figure out what that is. It could happen that it could have multiple times, but usually I look like this when it happens. So
could it be that your camera is falling asleep, so you need to touch it every once in a while? I know Jason, who's also a co-host on this show, need to touch his camera every 15 minutes or something like that.
Oh no! I turned that off. I know it's coming. The problem is coming somewhere with the software adapter I'm using to connect it. It's weird. I can't really figure it out yet. I've tried multiple things, but going back to the topic, as you can see here, these servers which are living outside of Azure, they also I can use tags, for example, to organize them. So you can see here, I use the location tag in this case to basically say, hey, this is in the Seattle office, this one runs in the New York data center, this one runs in the Zurich data center, right? So I can use tags as I know to, and I can, for example, then also add filters and say, hey, so let me show all my resources which are for cost center 1001. And now I obviously see all my servers which are running in that cost center. And you can see here, one of them is an Azure VM. This is a Linux machine. And then I have an Ubuntu machine running in my own data center here but is joined using Azure Arc. So I get already those management capabilities, right? To organize and discover all my servers. Again, for many of us, this sounds like, okay, this is not, but for a lot of companies, this is actually a big deal because I can already see every server in my environment. If I join them to Azure Arc, I can see them. Doesn't matter where they're running. I can see them in the Azure portal, right?
Definitely a big plus. Like if you're managing a few VMs, having just one stop to see them all, like it's wonderful.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning, right? wait, there's much more.
Okay, you're telling, don't get excited too quickly, Frank, like there's way more. Okay.
So I showed you that obviously in the portal, but you can obviously also use the APIs. And to quickly point this out, I'm just going to show you here. I use, for example, Azure Resource Graph Explorer. And if I use a query here, I already prepared something like if I would be part of a great cooking show, right? So I could basically go out and list all my Arc servers here. You can see here, for those who are familiar with resource types, this is the hybrid compute machines. So that's the resource type. And if I run that query, I basically get then a list of all my servers running outside of Azure. Those are all my Azure Arc joint machines. I could also run a query, for example, this one here, where I basically say, hey, I want to see my Azure VMs, but also my servers running outside of Azure. And I can then run a query, and here I just also summarize them and have a count then of this. And if you're not familiar with Azure Resource Graph, you're going to love this because you can also create, for example, a chart here which explains you how many servers you run in Azure versus, for example, how many servers you have joined outside of Azure and all that good stuff. But the point really is, it's not just UI, right? It's really the Azure Resource Manager which brings that to life.
It's not only pie chart, it's good stuff.
It's not only chart. Sometimes it's really, I learned this from a couple of other cloud organizations. Sometimes, especially if you talk to management, sometimes it's a good thing to have charts because it really helps.
No, seriously. It helps to see the data. Sometimes, like too many numbers, sometimes they have only like a glimpse. They have few seconds to look at their stuff. So if you could simplify, Of course, a chart, even if a pie chart is helpful, of course.
Yep. I usually do a pie chart of my favorite bars and a bar chart of my favorite pies. That's like something I do.
We have a question in the chat. Mr. Swoofy would like to know: is there a charge for using Azure Arc?
So that's actually a good question. We haven't really announced anything on the Arc pricing yet. But I will later show you how you, for example, use it together with log analytics. So with log analytics, you have the cost for log analytics, right? So if you use log analytics, it doesn't matter if that's joined using Azure Arc or anywhere else. You just apply these costs. Since these services I'm showing you are currently in public preview, we will see what the price will be. I don't think we shared anything on that yet. So today you can just go out and try them out. And that's what we will do. We will add a server, and you can just copy that, what I'm doing, and then you also can set that up and try it out. And it's basically free until you actually add, like, for example, again, log analytics, for example, because then you pay for the logs I think it's per gigabyte, but that then really depends on how many logs you transfer. Usually that's not too much. But again, that we will see that in a bit.
Okay.
So again, what we had a look at it right now is we saw how we can actually find things, right? We can now organize and get that overview. But Thomas, wouldn't it be cool to actually do something with these resources now? And that is what we can do. So, Frank, are you familiar with Azure Policy?
Yes, a little bit. I don't like, like right now I'm just managing I used to manage multiple subscription. Now these days it's only one. So I don't use policy much, but and in fact I just did we'll keep it simple. Yes.
No, that's great. Yeah, so for those who don't know policy, Azure Policy really allows us to configure our Azure environment the way we want it, right? For example, think about you're a large company, you give a team access, you give a group of developers access to Azure. What happens is they can just go out and deploy everything by default, right? They can go out and we have these great MV2 series virtual machines, I think with a couple of hundred virtual cores, I think 12 terabytes of memory, and they drain your credit card in like 3 seconds. So you don't want everyone in your company just going out and deploying the largest machines, right? So you can, for example, take an Azure policy and say, hey, I will be only able to deploy a certain set of machines, right? And limit that. Or I can limit my Azure environment to be I can only use Azure regions in the US, for example, or I can only use the ones in a specific country or only specific Azure regions, and so on and so on. So this is actually Azure policy that helps us to not go through an approval process and lose all the speed and agility we get from the cloud by just having these processes. But then on the other hand, we still keep control. Now, again, that's just Azure policy in general. But then what a lot of people don't know is that we also have something called Azure Guest Configuration Policy. Now,
I didn't know about that one.
Oh, you did not? Oh, you're going to love this
I heard
in that
about
case.
that, but yeah. Not much.
So think about when you deploy VMs in Azure, it's like also you want to make sure that the operating systems have the right settings, right? That they are set to the right, for example, time zone, that they are set to they have the right security settings in place, and all of that. And if they're not, you want to actually see that they're not compliant. And so that is what we can do with Azure Guest Configuration Policy. And I'm going to show you that in a quick example.
I thought that was part of Blueprints.
Yes, so Blueprints can also take advantage of this as well. Yes, you're absolutely right. So Blueprints can take advantage of a couple of different things. So you have, for example, policies and Azure Guest Configuration Policies, and you can put that in a blueprint and then use that when you create a new subscription, for example. But you can also just assign these guest configuration policies on the fly if you wanted to.
Okay, that's cool. I like it. Okay, I didn't know that. Excellent.
So that is what I'm quickly going to show you. You can see here I already set up my environment a bit. But what I'm actually going to do is I already have a initiative which is ready for us to use, which is basically a group of different policies. I can set a scope, and in that case, I just want to set it to my subscription, but you can set it on different levels like management groups and resource groups, or even resources if you wanted to. And then you basically go and select the definition. So what we have here is in Azure, we have a couple of built-in definitions. And you can see here, if you scroll down, there are a couple of different things you can do. You can, for example, say, hey, I need, for example, the settings for UK NHS, which is the health organization, so that like your VMs are set up or your Azure environment is set up in the right way. So you have that for many certifications. But what I'm interested in is, what I want to do is I want to check my servers if they have any insecure password settings, right? That's, for example, one thing I want to check. And then I could just go out, I could say select this and then apply it. And then after a couple of minutes, it would tell me, hey, which VMs are compliant with that, and then which ones are not. So I already did this, again, like a good cooking show. I already prepared this. And if I want to look if I'm compliant or not, I just go to the compliance view, and here I can see all my policies which are assigned. Some of them I did assign, but some of them are also our organization, which assigned them on top of me and said, hey, Thomas, that your VMs are secure, you need to do this. So what I did here, I have a policy here, or an initiative assigned, called Audit VMs with Insecure Password Settings. That's the one I just showed you. And you can see here that I'm also not compliant with that policy. Now, first, if I go down, I can actually see with what policies I'm actually not compliant. Again, an initiative is a collection of rules, so you can see there are some I'm compliant and I really don't care about these settings. But then there are also settings which I'm not compliant to. And so I see here, okay, I have 10 resources which are not compliant with that specific setting. But first, let me have a look which resources does it actually mean. So I go to non-compliant resources, and now the great thing, thanks to Azure Arc, is that you can see here, if I zoom in here, you can see that I have Microsoft Compute virtual machines listed here, which are Azure virtual machines. But thanks to Azure Arc, I can also use the Azure guest configuration policies for servers which are running outside of Azure. So it even goes down to my servers which are running here underneath my desk and checks if they have insecure password settings.
That's a big data center under your desk then.
It looks bigger than it actually is.
Oh, isn't it? It look bigger from the like? Is it? It looks smaller. Like, how does it say that? It's bigger inside, or I forgot. Doctor Who, how like this quote. Anyway.
Oh, I don't know. I never. Okay, I'm gonna out myself here. I never really watched Doctor Who because that was not a big thing in the Europe place where I was, at least. So
I just started recently, and I honestly I love it. But yeah.
Okay, definitely gonna check that out. So now I can see here, for example, my servers, and you can see I have an on-prem server. I called it on purpose on-prem server 01, and you can see that this server here is not compliant. So what I could go out now is I could now go manually to that system and check the settings and change it so that that this server finally has the right security settings. But I could also just go and create a remediation task and say, hey, okay, I want these settings to be changed for this specific server. And then I can go out and say, hey, okay, deploy me these settings to the VMs in Azure, but also to the VMs I joined using Azure Arc. So that is actually one of the great things now. So we extended Azure guest configuration policy to not just work with Azure VMs, but also with VMs and also physical servers outside of Azure. Good.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Do we have any questions so far?
We had one question, but it was about WSL2, so I just answer it and let you continue.
Nice, good. I really like WSL2, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, like I could if you can add anything, maybe the question was, is there a way for what was it again? Can you run Linux Dockers inside WSL2 without anything else? And so you can run Docker inside the WSL2, and then from Docker you just specify to run the background as WSL2, and then Docker is inside WSL2. So like whatever you're looking at, it's always there. It's always the same. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I see. If you have Frank there, you don't need me for these questions.
Well, I have fun. And again, your camera, Thomas.
Okay, I apologize for this, but I think you also need something to do. So this will... Here I am back.
Okay, you're nice.
Just to check that you also have your fun. Okay, so people are now asking, okay, Thomas, this is great. How did we get here? How did we actually add a server that it shows up in the Azure portal, right? And the thing is, you go to Azure Arc. You can also just in the search bar type, like let's say Azure Arc. And then you get to the Azure Arc page. And you can see here again, I was talking earlier in the stream that there are 3 different things we can do right now. One is organize and govern servers. That's the one we're going to have a look at. But most of the things I'm going to show you, like the policy thing, also works with Kubernetes clusters, right? So you can also use that. Or then here, the Azure Data Services, which again, still is in private preview. So you need to go out and sign up to actually get access for the private preview. So we want to manage servers right now. So I'm going to quickly show you that. So I'm going to click on Manage Servers. And you can now see here all the servers I already joined using Azure Arc, right? And now you're going to ask me, okay, how do we actually add a server, or how does the Azure server come up here? It's very simple. It's actually an agent we are going to install on our server. Running, again, that can be a Windows machine or a Linux machine. And again, it doesn't really matter where it's running, as long as it has connectivity to the Azure APIs, right? And we can have a look in the docs, which APIs, outgoing APIs that need to be, but everything is encrypted over HTTPS. So it will then hit the Azure endpoints and join these servers. So to add a server, we made it very easy, or the team made it very easy. So you can just click on add. And this will gives you two options right now. The first option is it's going to use an interactive script, which basically means that you run this script and then it will ask you to basically log in and join that server. But obviously, if you want to do that with hundreds of servers, you probably want to automate that task, and you don't want to run or log in on each of these machines, right? You want to probably just run a script or your automatically deployment on these machines. So you could also use a service principal name and generate that so that it only has rights to join machines to your Azure subscription, and that's it, right? So to make it easy, we're going to have a look how we can generate that script in the interactive mode, because that is a little bit more fun to watch than the other one.
While this is a switching screen, we have a question from, I won't try to pronounce his name, sorry, but Thomas, what kind of hardware setup do you have running at your desk with multiple VMs?
So that's a good one. So my mini data center here, I can't really move it here, and I can't take it over because otherwise I need to unplug it, but it's actually a Intel NUC. It's a very small, like if you're familiar, if you look for Intel NUC, those are very small desktop computers, if you will, from Intel. And I put in like 32 gigs of memory. I think that was the official limit, though I heard that some people managed to even put 64 gigs in. And it actually is very quiet. It actually doesn't take much space. It's very quiet.
Yeah,
it doesn't
there's
need
no
much
fan,
power.
right? Is it?
Mine has a fan, but it almost never goes on, except if I'm doing patching or anything like that. But other than that, I mean, you can't hear it right now. It's running. You can't hear. My notebook makes more noise than that actual system there. It's obviously not server grade hardware, right? There is no redundancy or whatever in that little system. But it's actually, if you use the right pieces, if you use like a super fast M2 SSD, then the system is super fast as well. So you don't, like, for running a couple of VMs in my lab, that's actually perfect, right? I have a blog out there which I probably can share, or if you just go to my website, you can read a little bit about this to do that. I hope that answers it. Again, if you have more questions, feel free to ask. So now, to make that script, we could just go to the documentation page and learn how that script looks like, but the team made it very easy by creating a wizard. So we have here that wizard where we basically select, okay, which subscription are we joining that server? And then we also, as I said, we need to select the resource group. So I already have one, and I need to select the right one because I want to really join that server. And then I have a region I need to select. Right now, I think we offer 4 regions where we can join Azure Arc servers. Again, this is because we are in public preview, right? There will be more regions available as soon as the service goes general available.
Yeah, that's usually all service in Azure always start like that. They start with the region where the ask was a lot more important, and then like as it go GA, more and more region have the service.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, to be honest, there's not much data going to these regions anyway. It's more metadata, right? And settings. It's not that you move your whole VM to that region. It's just that the agent connects to that region. That's basically what it is. And again, to test it, it doesn't really matter anyway. I could also connect it to the US region right now, but obviously I'm going to connect it to the closest Azure region. I then also can go out and say, okay, what server I'm going to join. And obviously, it could be a Linux machine and a Windows machine, and that would give me at the end different scripts, right?
Let
so
me
when
switch
it's
screen, Thomas, since I'm always in the way. So we'll go. We lose the little blue bird, but we are so now both in the top right corner.
That's actually good. Then I can look down, like. So yeah, so these are the again the just the things I'm gonna select. In my case, I'm gonna join for this demo. I'm gonna join a Windows machine, but it's the same mechanism as I would do with a Linux machine as well. And then if the server is behind a proxy, like if you're in a company environment, you probably have a proxy in your environment. Then you can also add a proxy URL here. And on the next step, I showed you already before that you can use tags, right? So you could go out and add specific tags if you wanted to. In my case, you can always add them later as well. We're gonna add them later. And then the last screen really is where we can download the script, or we can just have a look at it here. And if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see here there's 3 lines. It's actually 3 lines, more or less. The first line really does download the agent, which is an MSI file, even on the Windows side. And then the second part is actually going to install that agent and that MSI file. And then the last one is then the connect, where we actually go out and say, hey, you connect to our Azure tenant. You're going to connect to that specific subscription. You're joining that resource group in that specific region. That's basically what it is. And that is what we are going to do right now. So I'm going to copy this. And then, like, if I'm big, I'm just going to copy that inside here for a moment, because I want to really run this one by one. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to switch to my local Hyper-V installation here on my Windows 10 machine, right? I have Hyper-V again on this other machine, but to make it a little bit easier for the demo, I set up here a couple of servers. And you can see here, I created a non-prem server 2. And if I switch back to the Azure portal, so I copied this, that's good. You will see that we don't have an on-prem server 2 here. We only have one on-prem server 1. But no 2. So that is the server we are going to join. And you can see here it's running. If I open this up, let me see, I will just use this here just for a quick demo. Again, this also, if you're running VMware or anything else, or even if it's a physical machine, that works as well. And again, it could also be a Linux machine. So this is actually the machine this is actually the server we're going to join. This is now Windows Server 2019, but it could also be Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, 2016, all that kind of systems, right? So I want to show you something, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Frank, but maybe I have something I can show you. So if you're working with Hyper-V, now I want to copy commands in this VM, right? I could go out and copy these commands and then basically just go inside as I did with the console. But I can also connect my PowerShell directly to that machine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my credentials here. So let's go get credentials, administrator. Okay, so what I can do is, if you're familiar with PowerShell, then we can do a command with PowerShell remoting called enter PS session, right? And for that, I would need to have network connectivity to that machine. I would need to name, the ports need to be open and all of that. Now, since I'm running on that Hyper-V server here, I can, instead of saying, hey, computer name, I can actually enter VM name. So I give it the name of the VM, on-prem server 2, and then I still need the credentials. So I'm gonna add, credential 2. And now if I did type the password and everything correctly, I can just hit enter. And did I start it up the right way? It will connect to my on-prem server 2 with my credentials. Yep, and you can see here, if I zoom a little bit in, I'm now connected to my on-prem server 2 here. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So now we can go out and actually run my commands here. So the first command I'm going to run is, oops.
In fact, it was better when it was not maximized because now you're under the title.
Okay, perfect. Is that perfect? Then we move it to this.
Yep.
Perfect. So I copy the first line again. This is just to download the agent. So if I do a dir here, we should now.
Whoops.
Be able to machine agent.
Okay.
You still have me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know.
Awesome.
A glitch.
I'm sometimes just not moving.
Oh, it was no moving, no sound, but for just 1 second. So.
Okay. Good. So I downloaded the agent. The second command here I copied is basically to install that agent. Again, I could also just run it very simple, as we know it. We could, like, if we work in the UI, we could basically go out and just double click it and install. So we're going to install that that agent, and this only takes a couple of seconds usually to complete. And this will basically do all the services on Windows and or the daemon on the Linux machine. So this will set all of that up. Come on. And while I'm waiting here, I will copy the last command, which will then allow us to basically join that server.
And you are right, by the way. I didn't know that that command to remote
No.
PowerShell, whatever.
No one knows about that. That's why I'm highlighting it. But it's pretty cool especially if you build some automation. You can do that.
Yeah, like it's just like SSH, right? SSH, sorry, in English.
Yeah, but without the network connectivity, right? So if your VM does not have network connectivity, it would still work. It can work with it. It doesn't take the network path. It goes over the virtualization bus directly inside the VM. So that's why you can always run this against your VM as long as there's an operating system in the VM. Okay, so we installed that agent, and then the last command is basically to go out and connect this server to my subscription. And this will be now the interactive one. You can see here now, this will ask me to log in the device login page. So I'm going to open that one up here. Oops. And then I need the, oopsie, I'm not very patient when it comes to loading. So I copy this authentication code, copy that. And now I obviously select my Microsoft account to log in, to authorize that I can do this. And actually, this should actually already be logged in. So, but therefore, you can see here two-factor and all. It's very secure. I was hoping to do that without doing all this, but perfect. So you can see here, it says, okay, you're done, Thomas. That's great. So let's switch back to the terminal here, and you can see it will take a couple of seconds now, and then it will say, hey, okay, the server is registered to the specific machine. Just give that a second to complete. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Now you see that the server is registered. So if I go and clean this up, I can also, for example, see that I do, let me quickly go back. I wanted actually to see Azure connected machine. think that's the command, if I'm correct. So you can see here now, if you run that command, that's the agent which has an API where you can trigger and see what is going on that system. Oops. Or did I type it correctly? Just never sure. AC. Did that one? It's always great when you do it live. The typing is never my strong thing. So let's just copy paste. Even though it would have been very cool if I would have known top of my head.
I never do typos. Come on.
I was right, by the way. I copied the right one. It just doesn't execute it. However, it doesn't matter. What I want to show you now is if I go back to the Azure portal, if I now do a refresh here, and if I've waited long enough, you will now see that on-prem server 2 shows up in the Azure portal.
Oh, cool.
And before actually going to show you what you can actually see now when I click on that server, to make it a little bit more, to make people stay on the stream, I'm going to do something really quickly because I want to explain what we just did, or what we actually did here, and quickly switch to the whiteboard. So let me quickly switch here. I hope that works. And then, so what we're actually doing here is, if I'm an Azure user, and you can see that I'm a very good artist. So that is me as an Azure user. I even have eyes, and you can see I'm also doing the hair here a little bit. So you know that's me. When I'm interacting, or when any one of us interacts with Azure, what we are doing is we're actually using, for example, the portal. We're using the CLI. We're using PowerShell, APIs, and so on, right? That is what we are actually using to manage and work with Azure. And it doesn't matter, again, if we're using like Azure DevOps or something like that. Again, we're triggering these APIs in the background. And what we're actually talking to, I'm going to switch color here, is Azure Resource Manager, right? That is where the magic happens. That is where we actually go out and so if I zoom here a little bit, put this over here, that is actually where we have things like I showed you that before, right? Tags and subscriptions and all of that. So that is where all this comes from, where all this management happens. And underneath this, we use this to manage Azure resources, just like, for example, VMs or app service or containers or whatever it is, right? There is multiple, like almost for all these, I think it's over 200 services right now in Azure. So we're gonna manage all of these. Now, what people wanted us to do actually is and say, hey, again, wouldn't it be great to extend Azure Resource Manager and say, okay, I want to use these tags and subscriptions and all that smart management technology for resources which are running outside of Azure. So I have, for example, today, I would have VMs, I would have Kubernetes clusters, and I would have, for example, data services, and those are the three we offer today. And I want to connect these, so I'm going to use Azure Arc to then connect these things to Azure Resource Manager. And so now I can use the portal, the CLI, and PowerShell and the APIs to manage that. And what we just done is we installed that specific agent in a VM. Again, this can be also, if I say VM, this could also be a physical server as well. So that is what we actually have done. Cool. So let's have a look. Have a look at one. Are you also
so well with your drawing until you use red on black?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I should have used the rainbow pen. There's this fancy rainbow pen. A little of spark,
but that part should have been Arc, Azure Arc. Next time you use that as a rainbow
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Just trying to help here.
No, that's fine. I'm just, I completely agree. I mean, it's also those whiteboard apps are by the way fantastic, right? This is running here on my Surface Pro X in front of me, but it's shared with my Surface laptop. So when I draw on that, it automatically shows up on my computer desk as well. So that's awesome. Yeah, but enough advertising.
I never thought about doing that, but it's cool.
The delay is not so big, so it wasn't really. There's not much delay. The only thing you can't really zoom with your fingers. So now we have these machines here, and again, Server Prem 2 is the one we just actually added, right? And if we click on this one, we can recognize that it looks like an Azure resource.
You need to refresh your camera.
I will buy a script for that. And I apologize, but I think I will send a company which does these little adapters a very, very nice formed email.
So maybe it happens to one of our viewer also. So we're not bashing, we're just informing. Like if you have this kind of problem, or this type of camera, you may encounter those problems. So what's the camera you're using right now?
I'm using a Sony RX100 Mark 6, I think. Okay. But I think it's related to these little adapters I use, which allow you these Camlink adapters.
Oh, the Elgato Camlink, or was it another company?
Yeah. No, it's Elgato, but they're perfect. I'm super happy, except for sometimes when I stream, they freeze. But again, it could also be my fault. But I have tried a lot of things. However, again, if someone has an idea why that is, I'm happy to. If you
could have a talk off stream if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you can see, this server now. This is the server I just joined, and you can see here it looks like an Azure resource. You can see here it's joined to the resource group. It now has the status connected because obviously the machine is running. It's joined to the location, it's joined to a subscription, and we can now go out and, for example, add a tag. So I can go and say location. So click location and then say Tom's Surface laptop, because this one is running on my Surface laptop. I'm gonna tag this as this location. Obviously, in most cases, you would probably have a data center where the server is running, right? And you would probably use something else. But again, I just want to show you that you can now use the tagging for that server. And you can also see, I get some additional information. For example, which operating system I'm running, what's the actual computer name, what operating system is it Linux or Windows? And then the agent I just installed is obviously the latest one, but there are also sometimes updates. And the Windows world, they're coming over Microsoft Update, or you can download them manually. And in the Linux world, you would just have a repository which you add from Microsoft, where you can get the latest versions as well. On the left side, you can see here we have an activity log where you can see what happened with that resource. We have role-based access control, and that is actually pretty interesting. Because this now allows me to say, hey, Thomas, you can see all the servers. That's great. But for example, I want Frank to have access to only that on-prem server too.
No, you
right?
don't want that. Not even just one.
So what I could here go and basically give access. Well, I would only give you read access in that case.
That's fine. That's better.
To that specific server. But imagine in a production environment, you would have the SharePoint admins, right? And they only need to see the SharePoint servers. They don't care about what else they're running, for example. Or they should also not see and have access to them. So you can basically go out, as you can do with Azure servers, you can do the same thing. Tags I showed you, and then now let's come to the interesting part here. We can now have extensions, and this is new. I think we added that, or the Azure Arc team added this, I think 3 weeks ago, something like that. A little bit after build it was when they added this. So if you're familiar with VM extensions, there are certain things you can add to your VM. So for example, if I go here and add an extension to my server, and this again, it's not a VM running in Azure, this is a server running here on my machine. And what I can do here, because it's a Windows machine, it shows me only the Windows extensions, but if it's a Linux machine, I can show you that in a bit. It shows me the Linux extensions. So I have here a possibility to run a custom script. So I could go out and just, let's say create, I'm not going to do it because of time, but I could go out and select a script file. And in the Windows world, that would be a PowerShell file. In the Linux world, we would just have a shell script. And then we could basically go out and run this against that machine, and it would go down and run it against my machine running here, right? I can also go use PowerShell desired state configuration. So this helps me to have, again, a desired state for my server. There's also a version which works on Linux for that. And then the other thing is I want probably join that system to an Azure Log Analytics workspace. So this is something where you can send logs to, which we can leverage, for example, for monitoring or other actions as well, right? So that is something you want to install on your machine. And with Azure Arc, you can now go out, just say create, and then enter the workspace, the Log Analytics workspace ID and the key. And again, I'm not going to do that because of time. I'm going to show you that how it actually looks like on other server. But I could now go out and just simply deploy that agent on that machine directly from the Azure portal, and it's going to be ready, right? There's no need for me now going back to that server and do anything. So that is the agent part, and I'm going to show you that because I have already set this up with some other servers here. And bear with me because I never know if it's file server 1 or file server 2. Oh wait, I know something. I go to the WAC server. That one I know that I have enabled it. So here, go to extension, you can see here I already deployed these extensions, and one of them is again the Azure monitoring agent. So I deployed that and give access to that machine. Now I can do a couple of other things now. So I could go to logs and say, hey, I want to see what update logs I have, right, from that machine. I want to see what updates, for example, I need to install, or which one are installed. I just want to see what is going on that machine. And you can see here, I have a ton of possibilities here to access actually these logs, right? But I want to see the update one, so I prepared this. And I'm sure, Frank, you're absolutely aware, you're already familiar with Azure Log Analytics and the keyword query language. I think we called it Custo before we actually gave it a more friendly name with the keyword query language.
So it's keyboard friendly? How do you call
it?
Keyword. I still call it Custo. So.
Yeah. I to be honest, I also do. But when I started doing this presentation, I got very they told me, okay, it's the keyword query language. So be very.
Okay.
But yeah.
Keyword query. Okay.
Yeah. So it's still KQL. That still works. So I run this query, and you can see here now it sends me all the logs from that machine, and you can see here, okay, which updates are installed and which updates are actually needed. And you can see here, for example, a definition updates which is missing currently, and so on. And obviously I could run a lot of other queries. Now, people will probably tell me, hey, but Thomas, that's something you could have done before, right? If you just installed the monitoring agent, you could just go to your Log Analytics workspace and then run that against your environment. Yes, I could have done that, but there would be no way I could have limited this to only have access to that specific server. So when I give Frank now access, I want to give Frank access to my logs. In the early days, I would have given him access to my Log Analytics workspace, and he would have seen the logs of all my servers, right? But as we figured out earlier in this stream, we don't want to give Frank all the access to all the servers. So I can now just limit that and say, hey, Frank, yes, you have access, but only to that specific server. So you can access the logs for that server and that's great, right? Another thing I want to show you quickly, because I showed you that before, is policy.
Just before you switch screen, too late. We had a question from Zclad01 saying, are the pre-configured queries linked to the user or the VM or the current user or the tenant?
Okay, so this is my history. So this is my user history. So I only see my queries here, but I can also go out and I feel like there are some pre-configured queries. I can, which, for example, see if I find something here. They're all for Azure.
There are some pre-made queries just to help you getting started, and then you see your own story. And I think, I think you can save and share, right? Also, some query. Like if you have an awesome query, well, like you can always copy paste it, and like in whatever tool we're using. But I thought, is it in this tool that you could save the query and like make it the?
So I think here is a save button. So I'm not sure if that for that one, it's grayed out. I have to check why that is. But yes, so probably because this is a simple pre-generated one, right? This is one of the examples I took. Okay. But yeah, you should be same as in Azure Resource Graph. Let me see if I find it that quickly, but I haven't done it for a while. I could actually go out and actually save this here from the Query Explorer. But what is great, and I think I haven't tried that, but I learned that a couple of days ago, is I have copy link. So I can copy that link and then give it to someone or put it in my local company's wiki. And when they click on that link, it will take them to that screen and enter that specific query. So that is actually super cool, right? So if I would now give, if you don't have access obviously to my page now, it doesn't really help. But if you would have access to my Azure Arc system, then I could just copy that.
In your team or something like that. Yeah, this is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned that very a couple of days ago. I was not aware of that, because you can also do that in the Azure Resource Explorer. You can do the same thing. I don't think they have a button there. They only have a option to save the query, and then you can say it's a shared one. It saves it in a resource group, and you can then give it access to your team members. Okay. But you can also let me quickly see, because while we are doing
right
this...
now, let me switch scenes, because you're playing under pictures. Let me... In this view, we'll see the top of your screen now. So we see copy links and all those stuff. Before it was not there. For us, at least.
So anyway, I think it's not the one I want to show you. It's not working the same way. What I want to show you is, and I got a very good tip from one of our colleagues at Microsoft. So I do some advertising here. So this is by the way, this is the machine I'm using here. Someone earlier asked what I'm using here. This is a picture of the machine I'm using.
Share the link in Skype, and I will share it in on the chat, since you cannot paste URL in the chat.
Yeah, perfect. I will do that. So this is the Intel Nuke machine, and then let me scroll down here. Where do I have it? Run containers. No.
Of course,
or did I do that?
Don't go right away. Read that. Stay with us, but after the stream.
Yeah. Oh wait, that's not on. That's an IT Ops talk. I can never remember where I blog. So here we go. This is even more official Microsoft than before. So I wrote a blog here. Where is that? Maybe I really need to search it. Here we go. That's the one. Now I was scared that it is again on my blog and I need to switch back, and that would have been embarrassing. So this describes here, by the way, how you can actually work with these queries, and then you can save them here, for example, and share. You can see here, like if I zoom in here quick, I know the quality is not the best, but you get it. It's like a shared query. But you can also, again, here, take this URL, and then with the query, you put the query into URL encoded query, generate that, and then you put it together to one link, and that link then basically can be shared in your organization. So I will share that with you here. So that should be the link to do that. So that's actually pretty cool. So yeah, that is log analytics, and again, log analytics is very, very powerful. But I want to go on because I want to show you a little bit more. I showed you policy before, where I just took a policy and sent it out to all the servers, right? Now, when I'm the administrator for this specific server, so if I would now give, again, if I add Frank to only that specific server, the only thing he would care is about that server. Maybe about his family and his friends as well, but also about this server. So, he can then see what policies are assigned to my servers and then see, hey, where I'm compliant and where I'm not compliant. And so he can then check out, okay, he's not compliant with the insecure password setting. So obviously he doesn't care who else is not compliant, but he cares that he is not compliant. And so he would now check out that list and see, hey, there are 2 settings which I'm not compliant. So I'm going to fix this, right? So that is the part. I just want to complete the story there with the Azure Policy thing. But of course there is more. The other interesting part is, and again, this is a feature we had for a long time, but we didn't really I don't feel we shared that enough. It's change tracking, inventory, and update management. Now, since I added that server and I installed the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, the MMA agent, sometimes we call it that, I can, for example, have a look at that server and look at change tracking. And I can see if there are changes happening to that specific machine, right? So you can see here, okay, there are some services which changed, but here there is a piece of software which changed around like 10, 11 a.m. So if I scroll down, I can actually see the changes here. And have a look at that and see, look for these changes as well if I wanted to. That's the change tracking part. In the same part, I can also go to inventory and see, okay, hey, what software is actually installed on that machine? So I get information here. Okay, obviously the Azure Connected Machine Agent is installed. I have Edge installed on that machine, the monitoring agent, a couple of updates, and I can also go out and browse all the services here. And again, if you're on the Linux side, it will work in the same manner, right? You can see what software is installed, you can see the Linux daemons and so on, you can see what is actually going on. So very, very powerful. As you can do that for an Azure VM, you can do that for a server running outside of Azure. And then it gets even better. I don't know how you manage patches for your servers in your own data center and how you do it in Azure, right? In Azure, we have a tool called Azure Update Management, which you can basically go out and automate that. Now, people tell me, hey, Thomas, wouldn't it be great if I can use the same tool to patch my server even outside of Azure? Absolutely. You can imagine that we can do that here too. So I can now see, instead of, for example, going through the logs, right? I just showed you the logs, and I could also do that and then see what update is missing. And now you remember that there was one definition update missing. So I can see that here, and it will tell me, hey, here's a definition update missing. It's still compliant because that's just a just published definition update, right? But I don't miss any security patches or anything. So I still want to go out and install that. So what I could go do is I could go and schedule update deployment. Or should I say Frank? Frank could go out and make sure that he's a responsible server owner and goes out and patches that specific server.
And that's why I love so much PaaS and serverless.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing.
Now you understand why.
You do too many serverless things, so you're not even that much. Oops, sorry.
I used to manage a lot of VMs and server and stuff, but yeah, I think VMs don't like me.
I'm sure they do. You're very likable. Frank. So, so I could now go out and create a update deployment. Now, in this case, because I'm now the admin for Windows Admin Center for that specific server, I can just go out and patch that. So I call it the VAC01 update. We have July, so I call it update July. And you can see it automatically detected that this is a Windows machine. I then say, okay, hey, the maintenance window is like 2 hours. That's the time it can take to basically install and patch the machine. And then I can also say, okay, when you're done, reboot if required. So if that patch or if these patches, if there are multiple, require reboot, then reboot, never reboot, always reboot, or only reboot, so I don't even install it. So this is also, by the way, a great option if you just want to reboot your server. So for me, reboot if required sounds actually like a good idea. And then the next step is I can now schedule this. So scheduling could be, okay, update now, then in 5 to 10 minutes it goes out and patches the server underneath my desk. Or I can say, hey, because we are in the live stream, or obviously we are still working, right, during work hours, I want to select a day, another date, and maybe a time which is a little bit later. So I could go out and patch this like in the middle of the night when no one is working, for example, or I don't care. And then I could even go out and say, hey, making it a recurring task, right? So I could go out and say, please do that automatically. Go out and install the latest patches every Tuesday or every Wednesday or every month. So for example, every second Thursday or whatever you want, and you can create a recurring task. You can also then say, okay, what updates I want to install actually. Do I want to install everything or just like a specific type of patch? I can include patches or exclude
Frozen
patches.
again, mister.
This is great to have you. You know, like it would be silly if I would just be frozen for minutes.
Well, this time we got it for LAN Walker 2. We saw you. I was watching the time and if everything was okay on my side. So.
Yeah. That's what they all say.
Yeah, I've been listening. I learned a lot today. That's pretty cool. We have, just by the way, we have 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's like how we planned it almost. So that's
like
fantastic.
It was planned.
Yeah. So again, you can also include or exclude specific updates if you want to. Again, it works in the same way. I can also, if you have a little bit of time left at the end, I can show you that on a Linux machine as well. But it works in the same fashion. And then if some systems, before you install or update them, you want to run a pre or post script, you can do that as well. So you can directly configure that. And at the end, you just review what you just configured, and then you create that update deployment. Again, I'm not going to do that because it will automatically install that definition update anyway, but you could just fire that now against my system, right? So that is great. I also quickly want to show you now, if you never heard about update management, I mean, now I showed you how you can do that for that specific server, but I maybe want to do that with multiple servers. Thomas. That's impossible. Maybe the camera is overheating.
Yeah, we're killing your camera. Like no, like that camera, that Sony Mark 7, like he can take a lot of charge.
Yeah, we'll see. So again, this could be the like a single VM server, right? But if I have hundreds of servers, I don't want to go through each of them. So I just go to manage multiple machines. And this is something we have, I don't know, years now, I think we have update management. And as you can see here, I'm in a automation account. So if I zoom in here, you can see that this is an automation account and it has an update management solution here. So this is mostly used for Azure machines. So here you can see a list of my machines. And you can see here, some of them are platform Azure, and some of them are saying non-Azure. So those are actually the servers we're just talking about in our live stream. So you can see here, for example, the file servers I showed you before, and so on. And now I could do the same. I'm not going to do this, but you could now go out and schedule an update deployment for a group of servers, right? I can say, hey, patch all my Windows machines, patch all my Linux machines, for example. Doesn't matter where they're running, if they're running in Azure or if they're running on-prem or wherever they're running. And I can really do that dynamically, right? If I have like 2 servers which are doing the same for redundancy, I can say, hey, patch the first server on Tuesday, and then I create a second update deployment for Thursday for the second server, so not both servers at the same time go down, right? This also works, by the way, for inventory and change tracking, which I just showed you before. So I can see here all my machines. I can then see all the softwares installed on my machine. You can see here that I have Linux machines, and I can then see all the daemons which are somewhere running on my machines. And I can obviously have, with that search filter, I can go and see how many times do I, for example, have one of these daemons installed, right? And I can go out and look and also find out on which machines are these daemons existing. The same thing with files or Windows services and software as well.
You're frozen. I was about to let you finish, but
yeah, there's only one more thing left, which I actually want to show you, and I hope you're not going to stop me because I'm just going to show it. No.
Well, we cannot go over time, so that's why
No. I'm really done. Just last thing I want to show you was I didn't show you the monitoring part. And so you can enable Azure monitoring for your on-prem system, for your Azure Arc enabled server as well. So it then can help you and show you, for example, the dependency agent. And it can tell you, hey, that server, that connects to specific ports, to 15 different endpoints, basically, using port 443. And then you can go in and zoom in and actually have a look and see where is that server actually connecting to. The same thing you can see here for a couple of other ports as well. So I get that overview, and that already helps me. Again, I have that in Azure for my Azure VMs as well, but this now works for all machines wherever they are running. And then I can also go into performance view. And this is basically the last thing I want to show you is now you get some information about the drive. You see some CPU performance, you see some availability, you see some logic disk, IOs, and so on. You get all that information in the Azure portal. And again, imagine if you have like 10 or 100 or 1,000 machines joined to that, you have that overview about all these different systems. So that is basically what I wanted to show you today with Azure Arc, especially to manage your servers in a hybrid environment.
It was lovely. And now you're just a Skype logo, by the way. I removed it while you're finishing your stuff. We might have time for like if 2 minutes answer, so I could explain what's coming next after the show. But I have one question from Len Walker too. By the way, everybody liked your talk. A lot of chit chat about Arc and like things, and people are looking forward to know the price. Of course. But so the question from Len Walker 2 was really interesting. It's a little bit off topic, but at the same time, like it is close to our reality. Say, I would like to know how you guys deal with working from home. Wondering what are your challenge, Thomas? Okay, Thomas, you're frozen again. Not now, but earlier. No. When he wrote the question.
Oh.
So, like, did you? I know it's very off topic, but as a remote worker, did you find it difficult?
So I guess it's the same for you, Frank. We were used to travel a lot, but we also were used, I think, when we were not traveling, to already work from home. At least that was it for me, right? So I already, when I knew this, when I started my job here, I was like, okay, I set already my office up in a way that I actually can feel like very healthy, right? And I feel happy when I'm actually working from home. However, it's definitely difficult, and I feel like it's difficult for all of us. Especially because like it's now for months, right? And it's I really realize how much I like human interaction, not just like in obviously in videos or chats and whatnot, but also like really saying hi to someone, having dinner with the team. I remember, Frank, when we were in I think Copenhagen was the last time, right?
Yeah.
So that was nice, and I really like miss these things, right? It's like
but I think it was Scott Enseman who mentioned that right now it's not home working or remote working, it's pandemic working. It's a little bit different. Like usually I work from home, but every week I go to the office one day, could meet people, like do like a little bit more social, so it's a less productive day on like code maybe, or blog posts or whatever. Even like during the transit I could the commute I could work, but now I don't have that, so it's a little bit different. But it's hard. There's different challenges, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I completely agree with you here. Yeah, and that's a good point what you said with it's not remote work, it's like working from home during the pandemic.
Yeah,
it's
a
different...
It was not from me. It was, I quote Scott and Son here. So
yeah.
Well,
no, that's good.
We need to wrap up, so I want to take the time to say a big thanks to you. It was really interesting, and I will drop all your links in the chat. So it will be a bunch of links in the chat. All the links will also be in the description. The video should be on YouTube eventually. You can follow Thomas on Twitter. His Twitter account was there all along. Let me put it again. I need to put our Twitter account on this scene. So thank you a lot, Thomas. It was a very nice to have you. Looking forward to have you again and learn something in the upside, so IT Pro kind of thing. It's pretty cool. And
it was a...
sorry.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, Frank. I really always enjoy talking to you. It's always a lot of fun, and usually I'm the one learning a lot. So happy that I could show you something as well.
Well, if you want to learn a lot tomorrow, you could watch us, because I have April coming, and she will be talking about creating a mixed reality flash game with different playing with languages, like speak languages like French, English, and stuff like that. So,
okay, that sounds super interesting. I'm definitely going to check it out. Is it the same time as today?
Same time as today, but tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah, it's looking very promising. Like, she was telling me everything she want to pack in 1 hour and a half, and like, are you serious? Like all that in 1 hour and a half? So yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, thank you everybody. Thank you for spending this time with us, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.